Hi, folks. Welcome to the 39th episode of my podcast. We are again live, which has been the case for the last maybe 3-4 weeks. And that's probably the format I intend to keep going forward. The conversations will be in the same manner, informal, straightforward, no BS. We just talk to each other, like we were sitting and having cup of coffee or a beer or whatever we like to drink ourselves. And today's guest, I'm sure he is a great storyteller because he traveled all over the world. He lived in a few different countries, which are, I would say, quite different from each other, like Spain, Hungary, Poland, and China. And he is originally from New Zealand, which is an island far from basically everybody. So I'm very excited to talk to him. His name is Nathan James Thomas. He is a travel writer and also the responsible for the travel writing portal Intrepid Times. So I think the conversation is going to be very insightful. And if you are into the topic, stay around. And if you know someone who is into this, share. We're going to be here for an hour. I hope they can join us along the way. And if you enjoy the conversation, as you know, a like makes a difference. Every bit counts, especially when you are starting ventures like mine. And if you haven't subscribed, I hope you already did, but if you haven't, please do so, because the more people that are watching us, the more the algorithm will support us. It's all a joint venture. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring Nathan to the studio and we will start chatting. Hi,
Hey,
Nathan.
Victor. Thank you so
Welcome
much
to
for
our
having me
podcast.
here. It's a pleasure. Although I'm disappointed you said no BS. I plan to speak nothing but BS this evening, so I'm
Oh, so we're
gonna
gonna
have
have
to
something
revise
new.
my talking points.
We're gonna have something new. We can have something new here. There's always space for novelty, and actually, I think novelty is something that we aim when we travel, when we leave our homeland. I think that there is something about the search, and I'd say we are not always sure what is it, but the instinct is there. So in your case, like coming from New Zealand, do you think the fact that you were basically far from any other country was part of the appetite for traveling?
Big time. And that's something you see a lot with New Zealanders. It's the cliche that when the New Zealander goes to Europe, they don't stay for a week or a fortnight. They stay for months or even years, having flown across the world. They want to make the most of their time. And I very much did seek novelty or contrast. I mean, coming from a very, very pleasant, but not particularly exciting suburban, not exciting to me, probably exciting for someone from the other side of the world, but suburban background in New Zealand. I sought out the thing that was in my realm of accessibility most opposite to that, which to begin with was China, and then various other places. But yeah, a constant pursuit of something that did not feel like home, at least for a long time.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Like us as Portuguese, if you look at the map, we are at the edge of the continent. So there is this feeling of, okay, Europe is here, but is not as near as it is for the other European countries. And then we have the ocean, and the ocean is a big mystery. And they say that's one of the reasons why in the 15th century, they decided just to sail and see what's happening in other parts of the globe. So the unknown is a big thing. It's a big thing. So you mentioned China as the first chapter. Why did you pick China, or was it a part of a story that you just have to comply with?
Yeah, it seemed, I mean, China is so interesting from a New Zealand perspective because geographically it's quite close. It's much closer than Europe and certainly closer than Britain, except New Zealand identifies with Britain in a bigger way. When I went to high school, we didn't learn Chinese history. We learned British history and Irish history and French history, all of which is fascinating. But from a New Zealand perspective, most of our trade is with China overwhelmingly. There's a huge Chinese diaspora in New Zealand. We have great cultural links with China. And yet it wasn't a country that people I knew had traveled to. This has started to change. So I first went to China with a good friend of mine when I was still at university in 2012, and we spent 2 weeks traveling up and down. We saw some of the big tourist sites like the Terracotta Warriors in Xi'an. We went to the Great Wall in Beijing. We spent a few days in Shanghai, and we also, rode trains where the conductor would be smoking cigarettes in his aisle and people would have chickens on their laps. This whole world that seemed to vanish or at least diminish over the time that I got to know China. So I went back to New Zealand, finished my degree, and then moved there for aggregate of about 2 years with some breaks in between. First in Chengdu in Sichuan, where I studied Mandarin badly for a semester at university, and then in Shanghai.
It's funny that you mentioned China, because the first time in my whole life that I met people from New Zealand, it wasn't in China. It wasn't that far. It was in Hong Kong. So what happens is I just jump on a cable car, and cable cars are great for chit-chat. It's like elevators, no? Especially if you end up with someone you don't know. It feels a bit awkward to be squeezed there without saying a couple of sentences. And I just started to chat to this couple. And of course, the question is, where are you from? And they said, we are from New Zealand. And to me, which I was some sort of innocent person, was my first time in Asia ever. I just said, oh, yeah, not that far. New Zealand is not that far from China. And they were laughing because it's still like, 10, 12 hours?
It's still, New Zealand's even far from the places it's close to. There was something about the cable car experience. I have a very vivid memory. I was actually referring to it to my wife the other day when we were, before COVID, we were in Tirana, Albania, and there was this cable car you take to see the mountains above the city. And there was a young man from Turkey in our car, and we got up this really fascinating chat with him and just seeing the country from his perspective. And wouldn't have happened if we happened to be sitting next to each other in a tram or a bus or even in an elevator. You'd sort of look at the floor or stare at yourself in the mirror. But there's something about the cable car that forced confinement, but also this weird kind of adrenaline you get from being above the ground in this view. I don't know, maybe we can arrange like a travel speed dating in cable car. There's an idea out there somewhere.
Oh, it's a new idea for business. Yeah, why not? Why not? When did you start writing? Was it when you were abroad, or you were already into it when you were living in New Zealand?
So I've always written. I when I was even in high school and university, I had a self-help blog. It was just something I was very into as a teenager, and kind of moved out of that world quite drastically. So I don't believe any trace of it still exists, or at least I hope not. But I would write incessantly, even at school all the time, and I had a bit of an audience there. So learned some of those techniques, and always had this passion for reading. It was something that I was always doing. And my degree at university was one of those fake degrees. It was history, so it was essentially reading and writing, which I took to. It came quite naturally to me. But I approached writing seriously, as in I aspire to create something that has literary merit. I'm not saying I have come anywhere close to succeeding, but at least had the audacity to think that I was trying when I was in China. And that kind of led to a divergent path when I ran out of the money I'd had from selling my previous business and had to start working. And I started working by doing the thing that I knew how to do, which was writing. And then you go down that commercial copywriting channel where you learn things that are very much not literary, very much not about getting to a truth, but very much about connecting to psychology, mastering the experiences or affordances of the internet. And with the other hand, I tried to write things that were important to me, that I believed in, and connect with other people who are doing that. And that's how Intrepid Times started. It was almost a rebellion against what I was doing in my day job. Ironically, I've had to use some of those techniques to build it as a brand and functioning publication, but you can never kind of be fully pure these days, I don't think.
Yeah, yes, it's quite challenging. In terms of writing routine, say when you travel, like I think there are like different methodologies. I can think of you write on the spot. So let's say you are on a train, you are in a coffee shop, and you actually do the writing. Otherwise, you just take random notes, like a couple of paragraphs here and there, even using your mobile phone. And the third way I can think of is you just experience, and then once you are back to, let's say, home, just to make it simple, then you redact your memories. What will be your methodology?
Yeah, all of the above. It depends, again, if I'm doing more sort of professional writing or if I'm just writing for self-expression. Self-expression, I find then you don't always know if you're going to write about a travel experience after it happens. But when you do know, that's a really interesting thing. And you have this, you've had some crazy thing has just happened to you, or you've seen something that really moves you, or you've had to overcome something, and you feel this urge to write about it. You can't function as a person until you've written about it. Go and write about it. But normally that version that you've just written about the day after it happened or the night that it happened is not the version you're going to want to publish. You have to give yourself some distance to it and come back and edit a day, a week, a month later. And unless you're on a deadline, then you figure it out. But if you have the luxury of time, that's so important. I mean, so the piece that I had published in the journal Roads and Kingdoms was about a weird bar that I would go to in Shanghai that was run by this Canadian expat. And it was just a noodle house, like in the outskirts of the city. But at night, he had a deal with the owner where he'd bring out the kegs, and a bunch of weird English teachers from various different countries would come around. And I wrote about this 5 years or so after that place had closed down. And I hadn't intended to. It just came to me one day when I was living in Madrid, and it was just, I have to do this. So when it comes to self-expression and you have the luxury of time, the process can be really quite random.
Yeah. And one thing that I find interesting, because it affects not only the writing but the experience of traveling. If you decide that you're going to write about what's happening to you, let's say when you are in Colombia, maybe the experience will change because your disposal it's different, because you want to make it, let's say, something that can be part of a book. So you might add some covers or something exciting about, and then at some point you are aware that you are not being natural. So is it a conflict that you experience, or you are able to separate, let's say, the writer and the traveler?
Very interesting question. I think for those of us who identify as writers, and being a writer is not like being a doctor or a lawyer. You don't have to be qualified. You just have to start calling yourself that. Anyone can say that. But for those of us who have decided to self-appoint ourselves as writers, I don't necessarily know if there's a contradiction between living your normal self or kind of consciously trying to influence experience so as to optimize it for writing. Like if you read, say, Paul Thoreau, who's one of the classic contemporary travel writers, if that's not an oxymoron, classic contemporary, but he's always asking the difficult question or approaching the weirdest looking person in the train corridor or disagreeing with the person he speaks to, because it's going to result in better, what we would now call content, better material. But that doesn't feel he's deliberately acting in a way to get something better to write about, but it doesn't feel disingenuous. It feels it's just his personality.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great example. I think his writing is a fantastic combination of memoir with fiction. He's probably top 3, top 5 in that style. On the topic of writing style, there's one thing I just noticed when I was I read Intrepid Times maybe for the last 2 years, but I read the content itself, the articles. I don't read much about what you guys tell about yourselves. I'm more interested in the content. But one thing that really struck me was this, that you refer yourselves as travel writing, but not travel blogging. Can you unpack that?
First of all, thank you so much for saying that you've been reading Entrepid Times for the last couple of years. That's so great. You never know when you're publishing things that are not driven by SEO or by the latest trends, whether they're kind of going into a black hole or not. So it's meeting readers like you that, we publish phenomenal writers, and they deserve an audience. Yeah, I think that travel writing, not travel blogging, was probably me being a little bit grumpy and deliberately counter-signaling. But I think there are some wonderful travel blogs out there and plenty of them that I read, but it was a statement that our values are different from those values, and that travel blogging tends to be quite self-referential. It's very explicitly one person's experience. It's quite ephemeral, so a blog post is unlikely to be relevant in 6 months or a year because it speaks about this cafe, this bar, this restaurant. Very, very commercial, driven by affiliate links, often very SEO, search engine optimization driven. So yeah, personal, ephemeral, commercial, and we would aspire to be none of those things.
Yeah, that's exactly how I see you guys. It's if there's one adjective that I can link Intrepid Times to, is authenticity. That you are what you are. It's easy to see that you are not there just to make favors or to get likes or just to be popular. I think you have a style, an ethos, and you stick to that. Which, okay, it doesn't need to be everyone's favorite slice of cake, but it's a style. And when you read your content, you know that you're reading your content and not some other page. And I think it's great. I think we creators, we all aspire to have an identity. Let's say that you read an author and you are reading that author. Same with musicians, like, just to be a bit more pop. If you, let's say, Depeche Mode, you listen to a Depeche Mode song today, it still resembles what they were in the 80s because they know who they are. So they don't betray their roots, they evolve, but it still sounds like that band. And I think with writers is the same.
Yeah, I feel that, and it's such an important thing to remember because there's a lot of pressure to go in a different direction, especially online, where the amount of feedback that you have, in a way it's overwhelming and in a way it's completely lacking. So you can put a piece out there and you can know everything about the number of people who read it, the amount of seconds they spent on it, where they scrolled with their mouse, what device they were using, where they live. But you don't really know how it made them feel. You don't know why they came across it. You don't know if they read it out loud to a friend or if they read it on their phone whilst sitting on a train in a foreign country about to go to the place that you were talking about, or how important that piece of writing was to them. Because for an Intrepid Times story, our stories are quite useless. We're not going to teach you where to buy this train ticket or where to eat or how to save money. You'll get a sense of what something is like. But there's a much smaller and harder to define market for that than the blogs who will tell you 10 unmissable things to do in a weekend in Barcelona. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that travel blogging. I'm not dissing it. I read that stuff. It's really useful. But I also wanted to create something that stood up in contrast to it.
Yeah. Let's set aside the travel now. Just focus on building a business. So I think you're almost like I know you have a small team, but you're probably the main person there. What would be the biggest challenge from running an online business, and the biggest beauty?
Yeah, so Intrepid Times is not my main income source. I have my communications. It used to be copywriting, but now, because I'm a bit more established, it's normally training writers, helping companies determine how they're going to communicate. So it's the same skills that we bring to Intrepid Times, but deployed in a much more sort of ruthlessly commercial way. And that can be a lot of fun as well. So with Intrepid Times, I've had both the curse and the luxury of it not needing to necessarily be viable as a business. It's been subsidized. It's becoming a little bit more self-sufficient, and I would like it to be self-sufficient. I don't think it will ever be sort of pay the mortgage or anything, but I think it is almost a moral case that if your publication does its job in the world, there should be a way to solve the funding problem of it. Like, trying to find the right way to articulate that if you actually are doing something worthwhile, the evidence of that is that there are people willing to fund it because of the value they get from it. And there are various approaches to that. And I think you asked, what is the greatest pro and what is the greatest con of running an online business? Speaking specifically about Intrepid Times, the greatest pro is that the overheads are low, so you can choose. The barrier to entry is low, and you can play in the field that you want to. So we can have this incredible luxury of being able to run a publication driven entirely by my passion, by the passion of my co-editor, Jennifer Roberts, by the passion of our many writers. And the greatest con, it's the same thing in a way, but that given that we are not optimized for revenue, we haven't started with any sort of business best practices in mind. It's something that balancing that the commercial incentives are almost diametrically opposed to our sort of mission incentives. So a way to say that would be, our mission at Intrepid Times is to publish narrative travel writing with heart. Well, therefore, we would select stories based on what moves us. In order for us to succeed as a business, we have to publish popular articles. Therefore, we would select articles based on what people are Googling about a certain place and change the article away from what we would consider literary merit and towards what Google would consider clear and easily readable content. And so that's a kind of a direct contradiction here. And that's a battle, I would say.
I'm just checking here the comments on Instagram. We have a few people watching us, and if he's speaking about Albania traveling on trains, something tells me Vitor must have great stories to share in Balkan night trains, maybe in Hungarian, Serbian night trains. And that's the comment from a friend of mine. I'm not going to disclose that story because I think there are some under 18 people watching it, so I keep here the mystery.
Children.
Maybe I can do a solo
5 minutes,
video on that.
I'd love to hear that story. Maybe we can do a adults only episode.
yeah, maybe that. Maybe we have a grown up public there. Yeah, but that's a good remark. Are you able to write when you are traveling, say when you are seated on a train, airplane, or ferry boat, or
trains are great.
Or it's not convenient?
Trains I do some of my best work on. There's something about the movement. You can't take yourself too seriously if you're on a train. You have that slight bit of distance from your work. That really helps. Trains are absolutely wonderful, provided that you have a desk in front of you and it's not too crowded. And you want the train journey to be long enough, like the ideal length around 4 hours. You want there to be a dining car. I actually have such a train journey tomorrow to Krakow, which I'm really looking forward to. Planes just sort of, I feel my brain constricts. I will take notes of ideas, but I've never done any coherent work on airplanes. And I'm in awe of people who can. Buses are unspeakable. I have a friend who can write in the car, like not when he's driving, but he'll be in the back seat of a car, laptop. Did a long multi-country journey with him and some of the friends, and he was in the back of the car with the laptop open writing stories out, which I could not do.
In terms of advice, let's say someone wants to build an online business, they want to start having their own source of income, they want to drop a 9 to 5. It doesn't need to be about travel. It can be about some other passion. What would be your piece of advice for that person who's just starting?
Understand what your goals are. So if your goal is to make money and facilitate a lifestyle, that's wonderful. Be clear about that and optimize for that. which we didn't do at Intrepid Times. Don't quit your day job until your business is up and running. That's super important because you have time to experiment, to learn, to make mistakes. You work some long hours, long days, but then you get both functioning as well. I mean, of course, there are exceptions. Some people need to feel that fear in order to be motivated and get things done. It also depends on your circumstances, but for most folks who would be proper adults, who have all of the overheads associated with that, doing both at the same time until one is ready and you can make the leap is generally advisable. And liking the other people in your space. This was a mistake I made with my self-help publication. I mean, I really liked the other people in the space when I was a teenager. And when I grew up, I learned that I really liked some of them, but a large percentage of my audience were people that I just didn't share values or connection with. And that made it really difficult to grow that. One of the things I love about Intrepid Times is I really like our readers. So I did a workshop yesterday, on Sunday, actually, rather. And the people that showed up and the questions that they asked, they were my people. Like, we were from totally different demographics and times of life. They were from different countries, they were different ages, different genders, but there were people who shared this passion, travel thing like you have. And so if you want to play in this business for years, see who else is in that space and make sure you like them, because you're going to spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah, that's key. I think if you want to get things done in the right way, there must be, some real affinity, between the people. Otherwise, they can have the fantastic skills, they can have the best intentions in the road, but if there is no click, then it won't go anywhere good. Yeah, I fully agree. So you mentioned that you are going to Krakow tomorrow. I'm very excited about it. Where in Poland are you, by the way?
So I'm in a small village near the city or town of Skokie, which is about 30 kilometers north of Poznan, which is Poland's 5th biggest city, which is roughly halfway between Warsaw and Berlin.
Yeah, it's not that far from Germany, no? I remember.
Not super far. Not super close. The train to Berlin from Poznan takes around 2.5 hours. There's a lot of faffing about at the border these days, so maybe more.
German trains are a different breed in Europe, huh?
Yeah, although I must say the myth of German railway efficiency is a pernicious one. It seems like every time I'm in Germany, the train's late. But maybe it's just for me.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, with the overall, this German efficiency is not it's not as real as it seems. Like, the more you experience, the more you see that they have their own faults and flaws, and that's fine. Just that's fine. Have you been to Krakow, or it's the first time you are going there?
Many times. I love the city. It has my favorite bar in the world in it.
Oh, what bar is that? Maybe
I'll share it with your audience. Then it's called Piwnica pod Baranami. It means
whereabouts in Krakow is that?
Under the Ram's Head, under the Ram. It's just off the old square, so the Stadionic, so super central. You go downstairs. It's the kind of has been the cultural heart of Krakow. Any Polish actor or jazz musician or kind of weird hipster singer-songwriter who came up in the 80s or 90s often got their start there. There's a wall of currency behind the bar. I'm very proud to have contributed the New Zealand $5 note to that currency wall. I've taken many friends there over the years and some family. It was a really special place. Yeah,
I mean, I lived in Krakow for 6 months. I don't recall that bar. There's a chance I was there, but I don't have memories because I was very much into Polish beer when I lived in Poland. So it's possible.
They're good at deleting memories, yes.
So I wouldn't take for granted that I wasn't there. I hang out mostly in Kazimierz, in the Jewish district.
Oh, I love that area. Yeah, Kazimierz is my favorite place to hang out in Krakow too. Definitely recommend it.
So when we were discussing this episode, you mentioned that one of the things we are doing in Poland is searching your Jewish roots. Can you tell us a bit more about it and how is it going? What have you found?
Yeah, I mean, that's not why I'm here. That was why one of the first reasons I came to Poland to visit. So I went to Poland many times. First time in 2010, when I was very young. Some of my first solo travel, and it felt like a different world. And then in 2014, I came here because my mother's family is of Polish Jewish heritage, and I knew my great grandmother very well. I mean, she died when I was very young, but I have very vivid memories of her. And she was born in a city called Lublin, which is in the east of Poland. Actually, she was born before 1918. So, brief digression on Polish history. I'm sure most of your audience are familiar, but Poland was not on the map for almost 130 years until 1918. It was partitioned between the Russian Empire, the Prussian Empire, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Lublin was in the Russian partition. So my great-grandmother's passport said Lublin, Russia on it, but her languages were Yiddish and Polish, and eventually English. So my grandfather, who has been back to Poland, to Krakow, on trips with the synagogue, had never been to Lublin. It's a bit harder to get to. You have to. It's a long train journey, but he's almost like a mantra, the street that his mum was born in, Lubotowska to Lubotowska 2. So I went there a decade ago, and really fascinating time. East Poland is a different vibe than West Poland, where I live. It feels a little bit more raw. But I had a really fascinating time. The old square of Lublin is beautiful. And then just by circumstance, I ended up getting connections in Poznan, which is near where I live. I met my wife here through a series of complicated social entanglements, and we lived in various other places in Europe together and decided to move back here together a couple of years ago.
What else did you live? I think one was Hungary, if I recall well.
Yeah, so we were in Budapest for a year. We were in Madrid for just under a year. And then we moved out of Budapest to Saranda, Albania. So my wife had been working sort of normal office jobs. This is before COVID, before remote work was the default. And I had been doing my own doing Entrepeneurship Times and all my other things online. And she took the plunge and went remote, got some clients, and we moved to one of the cheapest Airbnbs we could find in Europe in February 2020, which is in Saranda, Albania, intending to spend a month there. And of course, COVID came and we ended up spending, I think, 5 months there and a month in Tirana. But it's fascinating. I made some good friends. It was really beautiful. And now Saranda is this crazy, loud tourist clubbing town, but we had it all to ourselves pretty much. And it was fascinating. And then Brexit also happened, because I have a British passport, and that used to make things much easier to travel in Europe with. We'd moved from Albania to Poland, and then Brexit happened, and I had to leave Europe before I'd figured out we were in Spain first. That's right. We were in Spain again, and then had to leave Europe and went to Georgia for a while, and then moved back to Poland, and we got married, which made it possible for me to stay here. Georgia was incredible. We were there for 4 months, 3 months in Tbilisi and a month in Batumi.
When you are living in a foreign country, and that's irrespective of the nation, when is the time, or how much time it needs to pass for you to feel that you are not traveling anymore and you are a resident? Because there is this border between you are still going around trying to find your way until, let's say, routine kicks in, and there is some elements that become part of your daily life. Like, what's your, let's say, estimated timeline?
Good question. I think on the kind of the simple answer is the first time you have to go to a supermarket, or the first time you stand in a queue with normal people who live there, quote unquote locals. So if you're a tourist and you're doing tourist thing, you're standing in queues with other tourists. You're standing in queues to this museum or this restaurant or this hotel. But if you're starting to live there, then you're standing in the queue at the supermarket. I remember when my wife and I were in Buenos Aires, it was when I was standing, she was at our Airbnb, and I was standing for a while in a queue in a supermarket, and I was the only not local seeming person there. And that kind of felt cool. That's what I find exciting, those supermarket queues. I suppose the other side is that, like, I never really super feel at home anywhere. I mean, when I'm in New Zealand, people ask me what part of England I'm from because my accent is a complete mess.
It is.
And so I'm quite used to not feeling super comfortable. I mean, of course, it's a spectrum, right? Like in China or Argentina, it's very obvious that I'm not from there because of how I look, because of my inability with the language. Poland, my Polish language skills are still pretty poor, but I would feel local as long as the conversation's on a very basic level until my language skills are pushed out of their comfort zone, which normally takes about 30 seconds. But if an interaction is very brief, then I would feel more just part of the fabric.
I think one of the experiences that can happen to someone that will really tell you that you are a resident is when you notice that the prices went up, inflation. So, damn, this bottle of wine used to cost €7 and now it's $9.50.
Yeah, in Argentina, you just have to be there 12 hours then, because that's crazy there. But yeah.
What's the thing that you miss the most from home, and what's the thing that you are from home as New Zealand? No? What's the thing that you are happy that you don't need to deal with it anymore?
Yeah, so I'm very lucky in that my friends from home and my family travel a lot too. So because pretty much all New Zealand has moved to London at the moment. I mean, just an overwhelming percentage of my good friends from New Zealand have recently moved to London or have moved to London the last few years. So I can hop over to London for €20 from Poznan and catch up with people. And I've had many people visit me here. So I'm very lucky in that regard. I find that, as a native English speaker, I'm extraordinarily privileged. And even in Poland, whilst I'm learning Polish and I'm making effort with the language, I still exist in this English-first environment. Though I do find that it's a minority of my time is spent in a native English-speaking country, and that has been the case for 10 years or so. It's rare that I'm in England or New Zealand or Australia or the US, a country where English is spoken by most people as their first language. So I find myself now, if I go to the store, I'm trying to speak in Polish, and I'm sort of mentally rehearsing, do you have potatoes or something? And when I'm in England or in New Zealand, I'm very chatty. Nice weather we're having today. Oh my God, the potatoes, they're so big. And it's not my personality, but I'm just not having to practice in a foreign language. The day-to-day interaction is fun. Although it's not something I don't like. When I'm overseas, it's just a fun novelty to not have that for the few days when I'm back home.
One of the things I tend to ask English native speakers that travel, especially those who travel a lot like yourself, is how do you see the advantage and disadvantage of being a native English speaker, in the 21st century? Because we all know that you can find your way, but then maybe it makes you lazy to learn a language because you'll be fine either way. So how do you relate to that dual sentiment?
Agree. Like they're huge. The advantages are so immense in that a native English speaker of bare minimum education can make a decent living in pretty much in so many countries in Asia, in Europe, as an English teacher with no real skill. English teaching is extremely hard, but it's easy to get a job, and you have such an advantage that the world does business in your language, and someone like you doing this interview with me has to work twice as hard because it's a second language for you, and for me, it's the language I was born speaking. And then there is, which I think is discussed less, the counter side to that. Essentially, I was Olga Tokarczuk, the well-known Polish Nobel laureate novelist, there's this bit in her novel Flights that really pissed me off, but I think it pissed me off because it was true, in that she spoke about how she's Polish, and she wrote about how she pities the native English speaker because the rest of the world has their own language tucked into their back pocket, their own secret private language. And English is the language on elevator signs or bathroom signs or, airport documents. But the native English speaker has to have their private language used for all of these sort of mundane, everyday things. And I do feel that. I mean, it wasn't until I really started living in Europe where, my wife speaks 4 languages fluently. You kind of feel like an idiot for only speaking one properly. So it's, double-edged sword.
Yeah, one of the things I'm very envious of people who speak exotic language. I speak Portuguese, Spanish, English. Okay, just to make it clear for the audience. And all of this language, to an extent, or can be understood by someone basically everywhere in the world. With English, we will know you cannot tell your secrets because, I don't know, 95% of the people will know what we are talking about. Spanish is more and more popular, and Portuguese with Brazil, they have like, I don't know how many millions. There's always a chance there's a Brazilian. Now, my girlfriend, she's native Hungarian, and Hungarian is quite a language, as you know.
Oh my
so
God!
They can tell anything they want. Let's say if she's with friends traveling on a train, and they want to tell something. Oh, I forgot to buy my ticket. Do you have a spare ticket? Something like that. They can tell in Hungarian. We cannot. They can have these secret confidential conversations that we cannot. And sometimes I feel I would love to learn like a complicated language just to have these conversations that we cannot.
Hungarian is on another level. I mean, at least Polish. Polish is not the easiest for English speaker, but it's a Slavic language, and you can, you learn some Polish, some of Russian will become familiar. Czech will become familiar in a very amusing way because Polish and Czech's words are sort of scrambled in quite an entertaining fashion. Or Slovakian is almost mutually intelligible, and the Serbo-Croat are different, but there are still overlaps, especially in some of the simpler words. So you have access to this whole family to a degree, to a limited degree. But Hungarian, it doesn't relate to any of its neighboring languages. It's completely baffling.
It's an island.
Have you made any?
I tend to call it an island in the middle of Europe because they don't relate to any of the nation, but it's related to their history.
Have you made any attempt to learn through your girlfriend? Or?
I tried when I lived there, but it's I can read some. So let's say if I'm in a supermarket, I can find my way still. I'll be able to purchase the stuff that I'm interested in, and I can mix things because I'm not that good with cooking. So I can take a fruit thinking it's a vegetable and the other way around, but that's just me. As a very, old-fashioned male who doesn't spend much time in the kitchen. So it would be the same if I would be in a supermarket in Portugal or in New Zealand. I could do the same mistake. When it comes to speaking, not. And then, I don't know, I think with age, it's more and more difficult. I'd rather improve, let's say, or keep my Spanish and English to a level that I can speak with anyone about anything than learning a new language.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask you is on writing. So you are the author of 2 books. Is there anything that you are drafting at the moment that you want to share with the audience? Any idea you have in mind?
Yeah. So for 2 books, Travel Your Way, which is kind of about the why and the how of travel, and I actually wrote that when I was living in Budapest, and I was living this sort of dream life then. I've become much older and more boring since, but I would work for 3 or 4 hours in the morning, real business stuff, and then go to the cafes in the afternoon of Budapest, drink wine, open the laptop, and write my book. It was incredible. And then I wrote Untethered, which was more about the pragmatic side, so the business, the digital nomad side. And I've been playing with the idea about a book on the idea of home, what it means for someone like you being from Portugal, living in Ireland, like me being from New Zealand, living in Poland, what it means to explore that idea. Like your question, you asked me, when do you start to feel not like a stranger in a place, and to explore that through different people's experience. But when I started writing that book, it became more and more and more about Poland, and my time in Poland, and just what I've learned about this country, because I feel that Poland is so underappreciated by folks outside of this. I mean, whenever I have friends come to visit me in Poznan, the first comment, "This place is amazing," and I was like, "Yeah, what have I been trying to tell you?" And so that's a fascinating history. I mean, there have been so many great Polish writers and so many great foreign writers on Poland. It's quite an intimidating subject to cover. I have to be really confident that I have something new and worthwhile to say. So I've been wrestling with it for a while. I have a lot of words on paper, but the structure and coherence of the thing hasn't quite come together yet. But I'm hoping to get it done over the next year or so.
Yeah, and I think Poland is quite the hub for digital nomads and for Westerns who want to experience something different. I met a good few, not only when I lived there, but through the internet. And as a matter of fact, I think it was sometime in summer. I think it was July or June. I can't remember. It was sometime in summer. I had Johnny Blair, who was also a travel writer.
I've been in touch with him.
You know,
Northern
Johnny
Irishman
Blair?
in Poland. I don't
Yes.
know him. I follow his platforms. I think we exchanged 1 or 2 emails, but I enjoy following his material. He's very prolific. Clearly loves Poland.
Yeah, he just moved to. He was living in Warsaw. He moved to a small place, small village. I can't remember where. I think East Poland. That's like between Poland and Białystok or something like that.
Oh wow!
Okay, I remember well. Yeah, I lived in Krakow and Katowice, 6 months each. And actually, I wrote a poetry book, which is now being translated to Polish, to be, everything going well, published next year. So I look forward to go back there and promote it. It's a great feeling to see your stuff translated. I don't know if it's something where you experience, because then it's like your book that was not totally written by you, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Did you work with the translator, with the Polish translator, or is it like you hand it to them and they do their thing, or is it a collaborative experience?
No, she does it herself. My knowledge of poetry is very, very limited. I studied a bit when I lived there, so I could say is jeden, dwa, trzy, but that was it.
What years did you live in Poland?
2015. No, 2014 and 2015.
Okay, Katowice in 2014 was quite different than now. Did you experience the train station before it was renovated? The infamous old Katowice train station. I don't know when it was improved, because now the Katowice train station is like all train stations in Poland. It's clean, it's like a shopping mall, but it used to be infamous and scary.
Yeah, it was a bit infamous and scary, I think. But I enjoyed it, because my objective when I moved to Poland was just to be in a place where I don't speak the language and I don't know what's going on, and I want to see how I relate to that kind of circumstance. It was a clear objective, because I always lived to date in places where I knew what was the topic, what people were into. So I want to be able to feel the gap between myself and the surroundings. And I experienced that for a year and enjoyed it a lot. I don't think I would do it again, but I recommend everyone to have at least 6 months, 1 year in a place where they don't speak the language, because then even their self-talk changes.
Oh yeah, there's nothing more humbling than finding yourself just so helpless in day-to-day times, or even if you're somewhere where you don't even read the writing script, like I was when I first moved to China. You find yourself being illiterate which as an adult is embarrassing and strange. It's so important.
What's the thing that you enjoy the most about traveling, and what's the thing that you are not that excited about?
It's hard to say what I enjoy the most about it, because it's just so much part of who I am. It just feels, when I'm discovering something new or getting lost somewhere or seeing the strangeness, or you started this conversation by talking about novelty, experiencing that novelty, it just feels like I'm doing the right thing. It feels, I think anyone who's doing the thing that they are most passionate about knows what that feeling is. In terms of what I don't like about it, there's actually a lot. I mean, the logistics of travel, I hate airports and visas and booking flights and all of that, packing and all of that. Actually don't. I love travel. I hate traveling. That stuff.
Like moving from A to B.
Yeah, I mean, I like. So tomorrow I have a long train journey that I'm actively looking forward to. But if it was to be a flight, like I flew to England last week just for a day, and that I was dreading. I mean, the Ryanair flights are not the most fun, but yeah, all of that. I used to get, for many years, I would get very nervous about immigration and all of that stuff. Even though my paperwork was normally in order, there were just all of that. You always think that something bad's going to happen. It's just, airports are little mini dictatorships, and they're tyrannies, and you can't reason with people. It's very inflexible environment, and it just doesn't quite gel with me very well.
Yeah, and I think they are more and more low cost, because there used to be something fancy about the airport. There was some. Now the Brazilians would say there used to be a high heels event, and now it's a flip flops. That's what the Brazilians say, and I love that expression. Everyone would dress up to go to the airport to get on the plane. Now it's the opposite. People just wear whatever, because it's a flight. Which I'm not saying is bad or wrong, but it tells how vulgar it is these days.
Yeah. Exactly what you're saying. So I remember chatting to my granddad, who's in his late 80s, about when he would fly for the first few times, and it was, as you say, a high heels event. So he would put on a suit and tie to catch a plane for. It would be such a sense of occasion, and now it is trivialized, and there are huge, again, it's pros and cons. Pros: the world has become much more accessible. You no longer need to be wealthy or to save up even a lot to fly, especially if you're in Europe, and you can take budget flights for trivial amounts of money. I mean, truly trivial amounts of money. So you can sometimes get from Poland to UK for like 10 or 20 pounds, like astonishingly low for a 3-hour flight. And that brings the world much closer. And then, of course, we don't just stop valuing the flight experience. What I worry is that we also stop valuing the travel experience. Like, if you can nip to somewhere with no real effort, how seriously do you take that? How much do you think about it? I don't know. I mean, I think on balance, if I had a magic wand and I could do away with the budget airlines, I wouldn't. But I do think it's worth wondering, what do we lose with what we gain? Yeah,
especially because I think most people, including me, I'm not putting myself on a pedestal, we tend to look only at the gains. And if we have 1 or 2 gains, that means the change is for good. It's not exactly like that, because the picture is way wider. It's not just what you are obtaining instantly. There is a lot of things that are being set aside that you won't access anymore, and you forget them because you are so excited about those things you are now able to collect. So it's always good to measure, what is part of the picture and what is no longer there, because there's a lot to be compared.
Yeah, like I can't remember. I can barely. I think when I was a child flying from New Zealand to England, New Zealand where I was born in England, where my family's from, flying was a thrill. It was an intrinsic pleasure, and now it's just kind of an ordeal to be endured. But I mean, to even think about this conversation, it kind of almost makes me think like how ungrateful we are, given that we have this amazing. It's the great opportunity of our age, right? That the world is. It is. If you live in UK, you can get to 40 odd countries for less than the price of the average train ticket from London to Manchester. Pretty much no visa barriers, the tiniest amount of paperwork, and you have that. And then it's one of the great gifts that we have, and folks like you and I have sort of relentlessly, compulsively taken advantage of that. And something that big cannot come without a cost, a psychological cost of, instead of it being an occasion to go somewhere and really investing in knowing about it and treating it as something special, it's something to tick off a list or something to do on a whim. And the flight itself, I mean, the indignity of these flights is appalling. These Ryanair or Wizz Air flights, you're herded like cattle into things. And I say this, I'm going to book one next week. I mean, because it's just cheap, and they know this. You're going to book the cheapest flight, no matter how badly you're treated. But
if you miss it, you miss it, because it's the same price as your dinner on Saturday night.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
It's like that. When I went to New Zealand in 2019, was the spring before COVID, I found a bargain. So I flew with the Singapore Airlines low cost. Can't remember now their name, but they Scoot. Yeah, exactly, Scoot. Yeah. So I was living in Budapest back then. So what I did, I flew to Athens with Aegean. Then I flew with Scoot via Singapore and Australia. So it was a 4-flight journey. And the funny thing is how small is the road. When I got to New Zealand, at I think 7 a.m. So of course, no coffee shop was still opening. I was exhausted. I couldn't check in the hotel I was staying in. So I was desperate looking for a coffee shop, and there was almost no one on the street. That was in what's the place? Christchurch. That was in Christchurch. Okay, and I couldn't find a coffee shop open, and there was no one around to ask where could I sit. And eventually, I saw a worker, who was a construction worker, and he was Irish from Tipperary. And I lived in Ireland in the past, so we ended up having the crack over a cappuccino.
Nice.
You ever been to Ireland?
Yeah, not for a long time. But I have. I live in a small village where there are almost no non-Polish people, almost no international people. But one of the few other foreigners here is an Irish gentleman, and I met him on the train to my village, and he works at a pub in Dublin. Bought a holiday home here 20 years ago for pocket change, basically by Irish standards, and hangs out. A really friendly person. And there's quite a big Irish expat scene here in Poland. Quite a lot came for I'm not much into football, but it was like the Euro something or other in 2012. Yeah. A lot of Irish people came here for that and loved it and stayed. So, and I spent a few weeks in Ireland just after high school, and it's absolutely beautiful. I'd love to go back.
So for your trip to Krakow, if you don't know the place, there is a cafe called Milk Bar Tomacha in Tomacha Street.
Okay.
And that's, you know what a milk bar is, but I'm just going to tell people there. So milk bar are the former communist canteens. Now they were let's say upgraded, that they look like modern restaurants, but they try to keep some of the cuisine from the 90s in Poland, some soups, some dishes. So anyway, that guy, Thomas, which is an Irish guy, what he did was something in between an Irish pub without alcohol and the milk bar. So that's Milk Bar Tomacha. And he is great crack, as they call it here, great crack to talk to. So if you go there, and they have, my opinion, the best, if you like it, the best chocolate pancake in Krakow with banana sometimes. So here's the tip.
Milk bar tomato. I'll check it out.
Tomato,
I'm very intrigued.
Yeah, I don't know. I like because I think he kept his good Polish food, like cabbage and potatoes with schnitzel and things like that. And then they have a jukebox with U2 and I don't know UB40 and things from the 90s. So it's a crazy combination.
Well, I have to go see it now. I'll let you know.
Yeah, let me know. Anything else you wanna add to the audience, and let's say any word of encouragement for people to try to get out of the ordinary, which I think is something that you've done yourself. So someone wants to be eccentric and they want to go that route, but they're not fully sure if that's the right thing to do. How would you tell them, go ahead?
I think some of the best travel experiences I've had have been in pursuit of slightly arbitrary missions. So for example, to go to Krakow in pursuit of this Irish pub / milk bar. I mean, the fact that you're going to go there means you're probably going to meet interesting people who are going there. You might go to a street you would never otherwise have been to. So maybe you're super into old cars or stamp collecting or football or whatever it is that you like doing. You will find a community of people who like that wherever you go in the world. And that will lead you down streets that are not in your guidebook. It will lead you to places that are not in the blogs. And it will lead you to connect with people that you would not otherwise have met. So slightly weird, arbitrary mission to find the cheapest beer in Prague or the most expensive sandwich in Lublin. Like you'll find yourself in places that you would not have otherwise have been to.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Like the fact that there is something there that you don't know what it is. It's just a matter of being persistent, remaining true to yourself, and you're going to find that element. Maybe it goes back to what we with the thing that we started, the novelty. I think we are kind of doing a cycle on this conversation, which
like
is,
all good stories.
Yes. Circle. Yeah, exactly. Look, we are already above an hour, and I think we could be here longer, but we have a train tomorrow to Krakow. I'm a bit envy of you now because I have been to Krakow for some time. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the trip. I certainly had a great time chatting to you, Nathan. So I hope we're gonna have more of these. Maybe in the Milk Bar Tomasho or in that bar you mentioned at the beginning of the interview.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a real privilege to be here, and amazing gratitude to everyone who's joined live or subsequently. Truly honored, and thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
So I want to thank the viewers for this. I hope they enjoyed. If they did, please give me a thumbs up. It's vital for the channel. It's how this thing gets distributed. So please do so. If you want to rewatch it, this will be available in my channel. I don't delete anything. Whatever happens here stays, even if I say something outrageous as I did in the past. So it's no wonder if I did it again. It will be here. I don't mind. We are natural. We are spontaneous. And if you feel that someone missed this conversation, it's something they will be into, please share, because they can watch it tomorrow, next week, maybe on a train journey or at home or wherever they feel comfortable. So I hope I see you next week. I have an episode scheduled for next Wednesday, actually, a week from now. So I hope I see all of you. So thanks very much.